Shifting our focus to some international news, there's too much happening, but of course we'll touch upon this one little aspect. Reading here from the copy of the Indian Express, it says, after Ukraine gets a US-backed supply of banned bombs, Moscow has sufficient stockpile of cluster munitions for retaliation. This coming in from Vladimir Putin. Now, reserved right for reciprocal action, says the Russian president. This was Putin's first remark since the US announced giving cluster munitions to Ukraine. There's also another picture of the last ship that has left Ukraine seaport ahead of the Black Sea grain deal deadline. But just reading a small excerpt so that you understand what and where this particular war is headed and stands at. Vladimir Putin said in an interview published on Sunday that Russia has a sufficient stockpile of cluster munitions and warned that Russia reserves the right to take reciprocal action if Ukraine uses the controversial weapons. Now, in his comments on the delivery of cluster munitions to Ukraine from the United States, Vladimir Putin said that Russia has not used cluster bombs in its war in Ukraine so far. The use of cluster bombs by both Russia and Ukraine has been widely documented, including by the Associated Press and the international humanitarian organizations, and cluster rounds have been found in the aftermath of Russian strikes. Until now, this is a quotation, until now, we have not done this, we have not used it, and we have not had such a need, is what Vladimir Putin said. Rossiya TV reporter Pavel Zarubin published excerpts of the interview to his Telegram channel Sunday ahead of a scheduled broadcast night. The Pentagon has said that said on Thursday that cluster munitions provided by the United States had arrived. They were confirming essentially that the cluster munitions are with Ukraine. So Moscow says they haven't used these cluster munitions. Ukraine now has the cluster munitions, but there are excerpts and documentations, well, allegedly, where these cluster munitions have been used by the Russian forces. It has been found in the aftermath of the Russian destruction.
So Kabir, you know, what are these cluster ammunitions? The cluster bombs, what happens is when we use it in a field, it is a small, it is a series of bombs that tend to be, you know, spraying a lot of these bomblets. And these bomblets tend to fall into a large area and it tries to neutralize that area. Basically, it is a lot of bombs being thrown at the same time, small ones, but
larger area is covered
in a single shot. But the danger happens is that most of the times, a lot of these bombs don't explode. And they tend to be lying there. We don't know whether they are live or, you know, they tend to get live at certain points. And there have been a lot of disasters that happened because of this. And that's why cluster bombs were considered to be a humanitarian risk. And now with the US arming the Ukrainians with the cluster bombs, the Russians, of course, will have to use their stockpiles as well when it comes to it. And another issue that would come up, of course, would be the humanitarian nature of this, because these bomblets, as I said, could remain in the ground without exploding for quite some time, and some of the innocent victim might be a part of it. We did have Cambodia, in fact, warning the US about it, saying that when you gave it to Ukraine, do you remember what you did in Vietnam? So that is something that is quite extraordinary enough to actually see from history. And I think this war, especially that is being going on, it is just being pitched up. You're talking about tactical nuclear weapons, you're talking about cluster bombs, you're talking about internal rebellions within the Russian ranks. Then you're talking about how the Ukrainians are slowly, ceding land. Then they're trying to go for a counteroffensive. This war has gone on many ways in such trajectories that only has complicated further. And cluster bombs are only going to complicate it further.
Well, we'll have to wait and watch what happens, even as the world has been waiting for the better part of almost 2 years of where is this Ukraine-Russian conflict headed. It is already, scripting history each passing day, even as the last ship has left the Ukraine seaport ahead of the Black Sea grain deal deadline. This is the last ship to travel under a UN brokered deal that allows the safe Black Sea export of Ukrainian grain left. That particular ship left the port of Odessa early on Sunday ahead of the deadline to extend the agreement. Russia has not agreed to register any new ships. Well, we know Russia wouldn't really want to register any new ships over there as well. So cluster munitions, do they have it? Do they not have it? Have they used it? Have they not used it? So many questions that are now doing the rounds.